Hey guys, I wanted to bring you another video of basically a how-to on how to change your ostomy appliance. Now, this is one that I've really put off doing because I spend so much time in the bathroom. Usually I'm taking photos of my stoma, I'm letting my skin air out, I usually have a shower when I'm doing an appliance change, so I don't usually have, an hour to record a video. But I'm going to show you just a basic rundown of how I change my appliance. Now, depending on your skin condition, if you've got yeast infection or any kind of problem with your skin, you may have to add a few more steps. So this is kind of a basic run through of how I change my appliance, and I will be using both the adhesive removers and also barrier ring. So let's get started. Now, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to get all your supplies ready. Now, I've got everything laid out here. I've got my pouch, I've got my wafer, I've got both a spray adhesive remover, and I have wipes. Now, the wipes I tend to use if there's any residue left over from my wafer, or if I'm using a barrier ring, that tends to have like a sticky residue that usually comes off pretty well with a wipe. Now I've also got a barrier ring here. I've got scissors and a pen. Now the pen I use to mark the hole in my wafer, and I've also got some measuring guides here, both my previous cutout and the actual stoma guides that's normally included with your supplies. Now, gauze is also really important to keep on you. I don't generally use tissue paper when I'm changing my appliance because I find that it gets stuck to the stoma, it gets kind of stuck to the skin, and it's really a bother. Now, one tip that I do want to mention that I think a lot of people don't realize, use a baggie when you're changing your appliance. And what I mean by that is just hang it off your belt or your pants, and I'll show you what happens here. Now what will happen is when I take off my appliance, it'll just fall into the bag and I don't have to worry about fumbling around with what to do with it. And it also keeps the any output that's coming out of my stoma, it keeps it into the bag rather than going onto my pants, or some people I know will put a towel around them, and I think it just avoids a lot of problems. Now, having said that, if you can change your appliance when your stoma is quiet, that's always the ideal. For some ileostomates, you don't really have an option. Sometimes it's very active, but if you time your meals with your appliance changes, then you can kind of find an hour or two where your stoma is fairly quiet. So this is generally when I change my appliance. It's early afternoon to mid-afternoon is when my stoma is very quiet, and we'll see what happens when I take the appliance off. But you may see some poop. It's not a big deal. Like I said, it'll just fall into the bag, and you don't have to worry about it, okay? Now, adhesive remover sprays are amazing. What they'll do is they'll soften up any of the adhesive that's on your wafer before you actually take the appliance off. Now, I find a big difference between using wipes and a spray, because wipes don't really get underneath your appliance. You still have to peel away, whereas the spray will start to dissolve that adhesive right away. Now, where I do use the wipes is mainly just to clean up any adhesive that might still be left over. And I find with the Hollister tape border flanges, they always have residue. Coloplast, not so much. Convatec a little bit, and some other brands, it's kind of hit and miss. But I know with Hollister, I always tend to have some residue left over, which you'll probably see here. So you want to spray this just along the edge, and what that'll do is it'll start to soften up the adhesive. And I just generally keep spraying as I go. And on this particular product, as soon as you reach that center part of the wafer, things will just come off very easily. But I'm not sure if you can see on the camera or not, there's a lot of stickiness still left on there, and that's what I'll use the wipes to get rid of. Now I generally like to inspect my wafer just to see if there's any kind of erosion that's coming out that I can catch a leak on. So for example, if I notice any particular type of erosion wearing one appliance or wearing one accessory, then I would generally try to correct that the next time. So at this point, you really don't have to do anything special. If there's any residue, you do want to remove it with a adhesive remover wipe. I'm going to just quickly wipe the area off, and I'll see as I go if there's any residue. And there is actually from the barrier ring that I was using. So once I've got this all cleaned up, I'm just going to take the wipe here. And just clean around the area. A lot of the times you'll get residue or even a bit of lint and stuff collecting right along the edge here. You can see a little bit here. You can just use the adhesive remover wipe to get rid of that. Now, if you find that you've got any adhesive that's really stuck on there and you're having a really hard time getting it off, as a general rule, don't force it off. Don't try to scrub it down, because you're going to start to irritate your skin, and that's just going to lead to problems, down the road and over the next few days. So just be gentle with it. If something doesn't come off, no big deal. A little bit of stickiness is probably going to be a good thing as you put on the next wafer, because it'll help it to stick. Now, there are some products that you can use to cleanse the skin. I don't generally use those products. Like I said, I will normally just hop in the shower when I change my appliance, so I don't generally worry about that sort of thing. But for some people, they prefer to have that. It's really up to you. I think it's a personal choice. But it should be noted that certain creams and moisturizers and things like that you might normally be able to put on your skin, you don't want to put on when you're using an ostomy, or when you have an ostomy appliance, because it will interfere or it will often interfere with the adhesion of your appliance. So once the area is all clear, you do want to make sure that that's nice and dry. Now, because I tend to have a fairly hairy stomach, I do shave it afterwards. It's best to use an electric shaver. A lot of the times, people who use just straight edge razors or the disposable razors, they tend to get ingrown hair, and when that happens under your wafer, it can be problematic, and you really want to avoid those kind of problems. So what I'll do is I'll just take my electric razor here. Now, it's important not to get too close to your stoma. You don't want to cut it or cause it to bleed or anything like that. So if you're not comfortable going right around the edge, because sometimes hair does grow up against that, what I tend to do is I'll get a Q-tip, and then I'll use the Q-tip to push back some of the hair, and then I can easily trim it with the safety scissors that I've got. So if you've got anything like that in excess, you can just trim it, pull it away from your stoma and trim it, and just do that to your satisfaction. So once everything looks good, you're ready to go to the next step. Now, for some people, this might be all they need to do. They can just put their appliance on right after that. But I'm actually going to be using a barrier ring because I do get a bit of redness around my stoma, and I'd rather just take care of that rather than have it become a problem further down the road. So most of these rings are pretty much the same. Some of them have a different tackiness to them. Some of them are really sticky, some of them not so much. I tend to use the Ekin rings, and they usually come in two different thicknesses. For some people, they may find the thicker Ekin ring to be better than some of the slim Ekin rings. This particular product here is from Perfect Choice. It's the first time I've tried it, so I'll see how that goes, but you basically apply it the exact same way as any of the other barrier rings. So you basically want to take that ring and you want to just open it up so that it just gives enough of a hole so your stoma can fit through without there being any gaps around there. Now I'm just going to use a secondary mirror here just so I can see what I'm doing. But you do want to get right up underneath. And make sure there are no gaps whatsoever. Now this is a great way to prevent leaks. If you have very liquid output, or even loose output that tends to create leaks for you, this is going to be one of the first things that your stoma nurse will probably get you to do. And what it does is, as it gets wet, it will start to puff up and it will fill in any gaps so that no liquid can come through. And it's a fantastic idea and really will save your skin if you're prone to those kind of issues. Now the next step is to take your wafer and you want to cut a hole in your wafer if you don't already have one that's pre-cut. The product I'm using today is from Hollister. It's the New Image 14603. Now these are cut to fit. And what I tend to do is I'll keep my previous template, or you can choose to just use one of the stoma guides, although I find that going with a previous template, especially if you have a stoma that isn't perfectly round, will help you to get a better fit. Now, with the Hollister products, there's no real indication of what side is up or down, and I do try to wear it as a diamond rather than just like a square like that. So I'll tend to mark, you can see there, I tend to mark the top. Just with a little line there, just so that I know, because if there's any inconsistency, I do want to make sure I'm cutting the right area out to fill that, that inconsistency. So once I've got it all aligned, I'm just going to trace that hole. All right. And then I'm going to cut that out. Should also mark the top of this one. Now when you're cutting these holes, you always want to make sure that you're not cutting it too wide. And you don't want to make it too tight around your stoma either, because that'll just lead to issues. Sometimes people get blockages when their appliance is on too tight. But you don't want to make it so loose that you leave a gap. Even if you're wearing a ring, you don't want to have a huge gap there, because it's just going to create more erosion either of your appliance or the ring itself. So once that's cut out, what I do is I just generally do a dry run, so without peeling back the liner, I will just make sure that everything fits okay. Yep, so everything looks good. So what I'm going to do here is just take off the release liner. Now, Hollister has two release liners, so there'll be one for the center part and then there'll be one for the tape border. Some products like Coloplast, they'll just have one release liner, and also some products need to be warmed up before you apply them. I don't find that's the case with the Hollister. I find this adhesive to be extremely sticky, and I don't generally preheat it or anything like that. However, if you are using a wafer that doesn't have a tape border, but it has that kind of hydrocolloid going right out to the edge, a lot of the times you do want to preheat that. So some people will just put it under their armpit, some people will just rub it until it's warm. It's really up to you. Some people will use a blow dryer or a hair dryer on a warm setting, whatever gets the job done. But those adhesives tend to work better when they're slightly warm. So I'm going to go ahead and peel this. Again, making note of where my top is. Right, so I put it right over the stoma there. I'm going to make sure that everything is nice and tight before I take off these other release liners. And you'll notice here some of the ring is actually coming up through the gap where the wafer is. That's perfectly fine. That's actually something that I want to see because it'll fill in any gaps so that there's no leaks. So then I'll start to take off these release liners. And you want to be careful how you put the wafers on. I tend to be standing up. If you're sitting down, what happens is when you stand up, the skin will stretch a bit, and sometimes you'll get a bit of irritation. So even when I'm putting down these tape borders, I try not to pull it too much because then it will start to cause a lot of tearing on the skin if you're moving around a lot. All right, so that's looking good. And the last step here is to just put on my pouch. Now, for some people, the outlets on these Hollister pouches are really difficult to open. And you can see here, I'm even struggling to get that one open. So what I tend to do, when I finally do get it open here, is I crease the end of it. So what I do here is I just crease the ends here, and that'll just allow the outlet to open up a lot easier the next time around, okay? You'll see I don't have to struggle with it. And you always want to make sure if you're using a drainable pouch to get everything all closed up here. You do want to get it on the right way. So you do want to make sure everything is closed. The last thing you want is to put on a new appliance and then have your output just go right out the bottom. Now, Hollister uses a two-piece mechanical system. This does not have a lock on it or anything fancy. It just basically clicks in place. With some appliances like Coloplast Sensor Clicks, they will have a locking mechanism on there. So this one here I'm just going to put on, and you'll hear the click as I get it on, and the click knows that everything is going to be secure. Okay, so you heard that click. And some people like to also just hold their appliance. They get some of the heat from their hand and their body to kind of make the adhesives more active. Again, that's a personal preference. Sometimes it's just out of habit. You do it, and you go with it. And oftentimes you just don't have time to sit there with your hand over your appliance. But for certain wafers, you do have to do that in order for them to adhere properly. So I would follow the instructions that come with your particular appliance and see what they advise. There you go. So that was an appliance change. I hope it was helpful for you guys. If you've got any questions or if you have any suggestions on how I can improve my technique, please let me know. That was a very basic way to change your appliance. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of people that might have other challenges where they need to put on extra products on their skin. They might use barrier wipes. They might have to use stoma powder. And, you put those steps in between wherever you need to. It's always important to follow the instructions that come with your products. Some of them require just a slight change from a different product, and that slight difference might make all the difference in the world to how the particular product works for you. Always go by your stoma nurse's advice if he or she has any particular technique they'd like you to try. Perhaps there's something with your skin that it's not as easy to put a wafer on, so they'll give you suggestions on how to do that. But I think overall, changing your appliance shouldn't be very difficult. It's certainly not too much of a challenge when your stoma is being nice, as mine was today. But I hope you like it, guys. And if you could just please check out the website. I've got more tips and product reviews and all things ostomy on there. It's www.veganostomy.ca. See you next time.